Chapter 3, Part 1. The Pretty Stranger Who Killed the King. Nigerian Folktale. Narrated by Chukwuma Wanido. Mbotu was a very famous king of Old Town Calabar. He was frequently at war and was always successful, as he was a most skillful leader. All the prisoners he took were made slaves. He therefore became very rich. But on the other hand, he had many enemies. The people of Itu, in particular, were very angry with him and wanted to kill him. But they were not strong enough to beat Mbotu in a pitched battle. So they had to resort to craft. The Itu people had an old woman who was a witch and could turn herself into whatever she pleases. And when she offered to kill Mbotu, the people were very glad and promised her plenty of money and clothes if she succeeded in ridding them of their worst enemy. The witch then turned herself into a young and pretty girl, and having armed herself with a very sharp knife, which she concealed in her bosom, she went to Old Town Calabar to seek the king. It happened that when she arrived, there was a big play being held in the town, and all the people from the surrounding country had come to dance and feast. Oyaike, the witch, went to the play and walked about so that everyone could see her. Directly she appeared, the people all marveled at her beauty and said that she was as beautiful as the setting sun when all the skies were red. Word was quickly brought to King Mbotu, who, it was well known, was fond of pretty girls, and he sent for her at once. All the people agreeing that she was quite worthy of being the king's wife. When she appeared before him, he fancied her so much that he told her he would marry her that very day. Oyaika was very pleased at this, as she had never expected to get her opportunity so quickly. She therefore prepared a dainty meal for the king, into which she placed a strong medicine to make the king sleep, and then went down to the river to wash. When she had finished, it was getting dark, so she went to the king's compound, carrying her dish on her head, and was at once shown in to the king, who embraced her affectionately. She then offered him the food, which she said, quite truly, she had prepared with her own hands. The king ate the whole dish and immediately began to feel very sleepy, as the medicine was strong and took effect quickly. They retired to the king's chamber, and the king went to sleep at once. About midnight, when all the town was quiet, Oyaika drew her knife from her bosom and cut the king's head off. She put the head in a bag and went out very softly, shutting and barring the door behind her. Then she walked through the town without anyone observing her and went straight to Itu, where she placed King Mbutu's head before her own king. When the people heard that the witch had been successful and that their enemy was dead, there was great rejoicing, and the king of Itu at once made up his mind to attack Old Town Calabar. He therefore got his fighting men together and took them in canoes by the creeks to Old Town, taking care that no one carried word to Calabar that he was coming. The morning following the murder of Mbutu, his people were rather surprised that he did not appear at his usual time. So his head wife knocked at his door. Not receiving any answer, she called the household together, and they broke open the door. When they entered the room, they found the king lying dead on his bed, covered in blood, but his head was missing. At this, a great shout went up, and the whole town mourned. Although they missed the pretty stranger, they never connected her in their minds with the death of their king, and were quite unsuspicious of any danger, and were unprepared for fighting. In the middle of the morning, while they were all dancing, crying, and drinking palm wine, the king of Itu, with all his soldiers, attacked Old Town, hit them quite by surprise, and as their leader was dead, the Calabar people were very soon defeated, and many killed and taken prisoners. The moral of the story is, never marry a stranger, no matter how pretty she may be. Thank you for listening. Chapter 3, Part 2. The Disobedient Daughter Who Married a Skull. Nigerian Folktale. Narrated by Chukwuma Nwanido. Effiong Edem was a native of Cobham town. He had a very fine daughter whose name was Effiong. All the young men in the country wanted to marry her on account of her beauty, but she refused all offers of marriage in spite of repeated entreaties from her parents, as she was very vain and said she would only marry the best looking man in the country, who would have to be young and strong and capable of loving her properly. Most of the men her parents wanted her to marry, although they were rich, were old men and ugly. So the girl continued to disobey her parents, at which they were very much grieved. The skull, who lived in the spirit land, heard of the beauty of this Calabar virgin and thought he would like to possess her. So he went about among his friends and borrowed different parts of the body from them, all of the best. From one, he got a good head. Another lent him a body. A third gave him strong arms. And a fourth lent him a fine pair of legs. At last, he was complete and was a very perfect specimen of manhood. He then left the spirit land and went to Cobham market, where he saw Effiong and admired her very much. About this time, Effiong heard that a very fine man had been seen in the market, who was better looking than any of the natives. She therefore went to the market at once, and directly she saw the skull in his borrowed beauty. She fell in love with him and invited him to her house. The skull was delighted and went home with her, and on his arrival was introduced by the girl to her parents, and immediately asked their consent to marry their daughter. At first they refused, as they did not wish her to marry a stranger, but at last they agreed. He lived with Effiong for 2 days in her parents' house, and then said he wished to take his wife back to his country, which was far off. To this, the girl readily agreed, as he was such a fine man. But her parents tried to persuade her not to go. However, being very headstrong, she made up her mind to go, and they started off together. After they had been gone a few days, the father consulted his juju man, who by casting lots very soon discovered that his daughter's husband belonged to the spirit land, and that she would surely be killed. They therefore all mourned her as dead. After walking for several days, Effiong and the skull crossed the border between the spirit land and the human country. Directly they set foot in the spirit land. First of all, one man came to the skull and demanded his legs. Then another his head, and the next his body, and so on, until in a few minutes the skull was left by itself, in all his natural ugliness. At this, the girl was very frightened and wanted to return home. But the skull would not allow this and ordered her to go with him. When they arrived at the skull's house, they found his mother, who was a very old woman, quite incapable of doing any work, who could only creep about. Afyong tried her best to help her and cooked her food and brought water and firewood for the old woman. The old creature was very grateful for this attention and soon became quite fond of Afyong. One day, the old woman told Afyong that she was very sorry for her, but all the people in the spirit land were cannibals, and when they heard there was a human being in their country, they would come down and kill her and eat her. The skull's mother then hid Afyong, and as she had looked after her so well, she promised she would send her back to her country as soon as possible, providing that she promised for the future to obey her parents. This Afyong readily consented to do. Then the old woman sent for the spider, who was a very clever hairdresser, and made him dress Afyong's hair in the latest fashion. She also presented her with anklets and other things on account of her kindness. She then made a juju and called the winds to come and convey Afyong to her home. At first, a violent tornado came with thunder, lightning, and rain, but the skull's mother sent him away. As unsuitable. The next wind to come was a gentle breeze. So she told the breeze to carry Afyong to her mother's house and said goodbye to her. Very soon afterwards, the breeze deposited Afyong outside her home and left her there. When the parents saw their daughter, they were very glad, as they had for some months given her up as lost. The father spread soft animal skins on the ground from where his daughter was standing all the way to the house, so that her feet should not be soiled. Afyong then walked to the house, and the father called all the young girls who belonged to Afyong's company to come and dance. And the feasting and dancing was kept up for 8 days and nights. When the rejoicing was over, the father reported what had happened to the head chief of the town. The chief then passed a law that parents should never allow their daughter to marry strangers who came from afar country. Then the father told his daughter to marry a friend of his, and she willingly consented and lived with him for many years and had many children. The moral of the story is we should be careful of strangers because we don't know if they are humans or spirits.